Hello everyone, welcome to another edition of CanCham TV. Today I am especially honored and privileged to welcome CanCham board member, long-term CanCham member, Mr. Ralf Matthaes. Ralf, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for your time today. You've been here a long time. You've been here 18 years?
20 years.
20 years in Vietnam. You've seen a lot. You've seen a lot of changes.
Sure.
In this country. What brought you first to Vietnam, to the region? Because you're from Canada?
Yep, from Kitchener-Waterloo.
Okay.
Why I came to Vietnam? Well, long story short, I was born in Germany, and my parents and I emigrated to Canada back in 1969, and my parents had watched TV so that you can actually start to learn how to speak English, which obviously I haven't done that well since. But as a young kid, I thought Canada was all about cowboys and Indians and snow and Mounties, and watching TV, it was all about the American War in Vietnam.
Yep.
And then when I went to university, I somehow wound up majoring in communist government structures, which was kind of bizarre. And I was working for the Ministry of Finance when I read an article that Vietnam was starting to open up, and that was at the start of 1993. So what I did is I decided that I wanted to go to Vietnam to have a look, see what a real communist country actually worked like. I wanted to see what the war was about, and go to some of those places that I grew up seeing on TV. So I arrived in January of '94 up in Hanoi. I bought a motorcycle and drove from Hanoi to Ho Chi Minh City over 3 months. And during that period of time, I fell in love with the place and decided to stay.
Yeah, I think a very common scenario for many expats here. Just they come to Vietnam and there's something about this country that really makes you just.
Absolutely. I think what's important to note is those of us who came without a job don't consider ourselves expats. I think what's interesting is you have definitely two types of people who come to Vietnam. Mm-hmm. Those who came to explore, mm-hmm. to understand the culture, to have a different pace of life, if you will. Mm-hmm. And then obviously the expats, those who come with jobs to actually run companies and whatever else. Okay. So I think there's a strong distinction there.
I'm actually more in line with yourself. I came here actually with no job. I was living in South Korea at the time, and I came here on vacation, loved it, moved here, no job, just knew this was where I had to be.
Vietnam gets into your blood, whether you like it or not, you know.
It does, it does. So you did the motorcycle trip from Hanoi to Ho Chi Minh City. What made you stay in Ho Chi Minh City? What is it about Ho Chi Minh City that makes you like?
This may sound obvious, but number one, the weather. My father always said that you don't have to shovel rain. Yep. Right? And coming from Ontario, which is a pretty snow-packed place, the weather here is absolutely phenomenal. Number two, and this goes back about 20 years, the level of curiosity, the level of energy, the level of interest that the Vietnamese had in terms of talking to foreigners, understanding foreigners, that was obviously a key. Another one is this culture is still very Asian. You cannot say that about a place like Malaysia or Hong Kong or Korea or so on and so forth. Vietnam is still very Asian, and it has a lot of Asian characteristics which are disappearing from a lot of other parts of Asia. So I would say weather, the people, the culture, the history. Vietnam's got over 4,000 year recorded history. Yeah. Canada has what, 400 years, 300 years?
Maybe that, yeah.
So pretty phenomenal history. So that's really what got me to stay. Right. It's just the exploration of such a unique and interesting culture.
Yeah. Any favorite places around the country?
I love Hoi An.
Yeah. Favorite one as well?
Hoi An, as you know, is almost the whole city is on the UNESCO a list of protected sites. It's got a long history of being a seaport, lots of arts, lots of entertainment, beautiful beach. So I love that. I love the Mekong Delta.
Okay.
Like they say about Canada, like 10,000 different shades of green, yeah, which is very interesting. Yeah, and I think what people forget is that Vietnam is not Hanoi and Ho Chi Minh City, which are the places they have a tendency to see.
Yeah.
Vietnam really is about the 70 million people who live out in rural Vietnam, and life there has not changed that much over the last 200-300 years.
How often do you go out into the countryside?
I'm married to a Vietnamese, and my kids are half Canadian, half Vietnamese. And my wife has a lot of relatives out in the Mekong Delta, so we try to get out there once every 2 months, because I think it's important to realize that living in Saigon or Hanoi, you live in the anomaly.
Yeah.
You don't live in what is Vietnam. And I think the beauty of Vietnam is actually outside of Hanoi and Ho Chi Minh City. It is in the countryside. And I think you also pick up more of the cultural nuances when you go out in the countryside. Having worked market research for almost 20 years, I always even tell my staff to get out to the countryside to understand what the real Vietnam is like.
Yeah.
And I would say that to anybody who is looking to invest here. Obviously, you need to do business in Hanoi and Ho Chi Minh City. That's where you spend most of your time. But if you want to understand this place, you have to go outside these cities to really take a look at what the fabric of this country is made of.
Yeah.
You know?
How would you describe the the people of Vietnam compared to maybe other Asian countries?
Short.
What makes them really unique and special? Because obviously they are special. We stayed here. We moved. We married lovely Vietnamese women.
Well, I think one thing, the Vietnamese have a very good sense of humor. Very easy to laugh. Another one, the Vietnamese are incredibly energetic. Part of that is being young, but they have that Mandarin entrepreneurial spirit about them. Everybody wants to do business, which also means that in general they're quite hardworking. Yeah, and they're willing to put their nose to the grindstone to make things happen. Culturally, look, this is a culture that's 4,000 years old that has a lot of its cultural heritage from Mandarin China. Now, the Vietnamese don't particularly like the Chinese, but there's a lot of similarities of the Mandarin culture. The Vietnamese are very attached to the land, and a lot of that comes from Buddhism and from animism. Yeah. So it is all about the land. It is all about the family, ancestor worship, and whatnot. And because roughly 60% of the South is Buddhist, they have a very practical view on life. Yes, there's a level of superstition there, but they're very practical people. I think when you look at a country that's had 2,000 years of conflict, the practicality of survival is very important, which say you may not have in other Asian cultures because they haven't had that, how shall I say, devastating history. Yeah. Other things I think culturally, you just look at the food. Vietnam has got some of the rarest fruits in the world that don't exist anywhere else. So the eating habits, eating behaviors, the meal is the most important thing for the family, like it used to be in North America.
Yeah.
Okay, but the family eats together, partially because of necessity, but also because everything's shared.
Sure.
Yeah. So there's a lot of traditional values that still exist here, which may not in other countries.
Good point. Yeah. Which I've actually found very refreshing, very nice. That it actually makes me think back to my childhood when the family sat together, ate together. It brings back very good memories. I quite enjoy it.
Yeah, no, it's how shall I say? It's still a very family-oriented culture. However, I will say, with the development and evolution of Vietnam economically, there is a level of greed that has come into the society, which is obviously not what we signed up for. But to be honest with you, you know, the people such as myself that came here a long time ago, you want to see the Vietnamese do well, you want to see them progress. So this is all part of evolution.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, you just look at the living standard. I think a perfect example is when I came here, 63% of the population was living on or below the poverty line, and today that's about 14%. So if you talk about the single biggest change in Vietnam's economics, culture, whatever, it's the poverty eradication and the increase in the standard of living. Now, it's still not anywhere near to say Canada or whatnot, but my God, very few people lack for food. You know, very few people lack for the bare basic necessities. I mean, you know, I think 30% of the population was outside of the electronic grid when I arrived here, and now almost everybody is. You know, so like things like you know, clean water supplies, that's all moved up so well that I have to say this is Vietnam's biggest accomplishment, is the fact that it's pulled itself out of abject poverty to a, well, on the verge of developed nation status. Not yet, but on the way.
Who do you think is, you know, what country are they in the region? Would they be most similar to, or basically just a little bit behind, or?
Well, I think maybe the best comparison, and there really isn't a comparison because Vietnam's got such a unique history.
Right.
But if I look at Thailand, okay, Thailand, population of 60 million, very similar split, urban and rural, if you will. I mean, more urban in Thailand. But I would say that Vietnam is probably 15 to 20 years behind Thailand, but catching up rapidly. Another comparison you could make is the eastern China seaboard.
Okay.
Because if you look at China, I mean, you know, to be fair, in 1980, Vietnam and China were almost on par. But in 1980 is when China took off, and Vietnam only started taking off in the late 90s. So I would say it's roughly about 20 years behind the eastern seaboard of China. Well, if you take a look at the rest of China, it's certainly on par or above.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So.
Okay. Well, how about one last point about you personally? As a Canadian expat living in Vietnam for 20 years, what have been your biggest challenges living in a foreign country, living in Vietnam?
I would say first and foremost, actually, the language.
Not easy.
Vietnamese is a difficult language, as you know. You've got 7 accents. It's a very tonal language, so it's hard to learn Vietnamese unless you really apply yourself. For me, in terms of personal challenges, I've had very few. Obviously, the language influences everything. Okay. But, you know, if I think over the last 20 years, I mean, you know, 20 years ago, you could not find bread, you could not find, you couldn't find anything. I mean, Vietnam was dirt poor, right? Today, anything that you would want, that you have in Canada, save for good live music and an ice rink, is here.
Unless you're in Hanoi?
Yeah, unless you're in Hanoi,
yeah.
Exactly.
But who knows, maybe one day we'll be able to bring the hockey to Ho Chi Minh City.
Well, I always said I would leave Vietnam when hell freezes over, or we get an ice rink, right?
Yeah. Well, great. Thank you so much, Ralph.
Cheers.
Okay. That concludes part 1 with our discussion with Ralph, and we'll be back to talk about business.